He brought his lover to our anniversary dinner and told me she was the upgrade. What he didn't know was that she would never see him again after that night. Meet the upgrade, James said with a smirk, his hand possessively resting on the small of her back. Those 3 words hung in the air of Le Petit Jardin, shattering the carefully set anniversary dinner I'd spent months planning. 10 years of marriage reduced to a cruel introduction on what should have been our special night. Hey beautiful people. Your support means everything to me. Help me reach my next big milestone by hitting that subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and ensures you never miss an amazing video. Let's dive in. I watched them settle into their seats across from me, Sarah's perfect blonde hair catching the candlelight as she slid into what should have been my husband's chair. James sat beside her, already reaching for the 1982 Bordeaux I'd ordered, our traditional anniversary wine. His casual confidence was breathtaking. He truly believed he was in control of this situation. If only he knew. What James didn't realize as he poured 3 glasses of wine with practiced elegance was that Sarah's emerald cocktail dress would be her last outfit of the evening. The restaurant's warm lighting caught the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, my grandmother's bracelet, which had mysteriously disappeared from my jewelry box 3 months ago. How fitting that she'd chosen to wear it tonight. I thought we should clear the air, James continued, his voice carrying that authoritative tone he'd perfected in corporate boardrooms. No need to drag this out with lengthy proceedings. The papers will be delivered tomorrow. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her seat, perhaps sensing something in my too calm demeanor. She was young, barely 25, but old enough to know better. Old enough to understand that some lines shouldn't be crossed. Old enough to face the consequences of her choices. Of course, I replied, lifting my wine glass with a steady hand. To new beginnings. The irony of my toast was lost on them both. James smiled, clearly pleased with how maturely I was handling the situation. He'd always underestimated me. Assumed that my quiet strength was weakness, my patience was passivity. The next few hours would change everything. Each second that ticked by brought us closer to the moment when their perfect little world would implode. The evidence was already in place. The pieces had been moving for months. While they'd been enjoying their secret rendezvous and plotting their grand reveal, I'd been orchestrating something far more intricate. I excused myself to the powder room, maintaining my composure as I felt their eyes on my back. The burgundy dress I wore, James's favorite, suddenly felt like armor. In the elegant bathroom mirror I checked my reflection. Not a hair out of place, not a smudge in my carefully applied makeup. The woman staring back at me looked polished, controlled, and dangerous. Tonight wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Sarah would indeed never see James again after this evening, but not for the reasons anyone might suspect. As I returned to the table, I allowed myself a small smile. Sometimes the perfect revenge requires the perfect audience. The night was still young and I had plans for both of them. I retook my seat, watching as they exchanged confident glances over their wine glasses. My phone buzzed quietly in my purse. Right on schedule. In precisely 30 minutes, everything they'd built their little fantasy upon would start to crumble. James would learn the true meaning of an upgrade, and Sarah. Well, Sarah would learn that some roles aren't worth playing. Tell me, Sarah, I said, leaning forward slightly, how long have you been wearing my grandmother's bracelet? The color drained from both their faces, and I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. This was just the first domino. By midnight their world would be unrecognizable. The maitre d' approached our table with practiced grace, carrying a sealed envelope. Right on time. Madam, he said, presenting it to me with a slight bow. As requested. James's brow furrowed in confusion. He hadn't noticed that I'd been quietly running this show all along. How amusing that he still thought this evening was his idea. I picked up my wine glass one final time, savoring the moment. Shall we begin? I opened the envelope with deliberate slowness, aware of James's increasingly anxious stare. The memories of our shared past flashed through my mind as I pulled out the contents. Photographs, documents, and a USB drive that made Sarah's perfectly glossed lips part in surprise. What is this? James demanded, his corporate confidence wavering for the first time that evening. History, I replied simply, laying out the first photograph. It was from our wedding day 10 years ago. We looked radiant, young, and hopelessly in love. Do you remember what you promised that day, James? His jaw tightened. Of course he remembered. James never forgot anything. That was part of what made him such a successful CEO. That same meticulous memory had once made him a thoughtful husband, noting every anniversary, every preference, every small detail that made our marriage special. That's ancient history, he said dismissively, but his eyes lingered on the photo. I laid out another photograph, this one from 2 years ago. A business dinner where I first noticed something was off. James's hand resting a fraction too long on his assistant's shoulder. Not Sarah, her predecessor. That's when the pattern had started. 6 months after this, I continued, placing another photo on the table, you began staying late at the office every Tuesday and Thursday. You said it was for the Singapore merger. I turned to Sarah, whose confident smile had begun to fade. Interesting timing, wasn't it? That's when you were hired as the new junior executive. James's face darkened. If you're trying to create a scene. Oh no, I interrupted softly. I'm not creating anything. I'm revealing. There's a difference. I pulled out another document. Bank statements. Like how you revealed our marriage was over tonight. I'm revealing how you've been transferring company funds through shell corporations for the past 18 months. The wine glass in his hand froze halfway to his lips. Sarah's eyes widened, darting between James and the documents. You always said I didn't understand your work. I continued, each word carefully measured. But you forgot something crucial, darling. Before I became your wife, I was one of the top forensic accountants in the country. Those late nights you spent with Sarah? I spent mine following your paper trail. The memories of those sleepless nights washed over me. Each discovery had been another crack in the foundation of our marriage, but instead of breaking me, they had forged something stronger. Every betrayal had become a weapon in my arsenal. Those gifts you've been lavishing on Sarah. The bracelet you stole from my grandmother's collection to give her. The penthouse apartment, the offshore account in her name, they're all traceable to embezzled company funds. Sarah's face had lost all color now. James, you said those funds were legitimate. You said. Quiet, he snapped, but the damage was done. The first crack in their united front had appeared. I withdrew another photo from the envelope. This one was from 6 months ago, our last happy moment together, or so I'd thought. We were at the company's charity gala, smiling for the cameras. You remember this night, don't you? It was the same night you approved the transfer of $50 million to our account in the Caymans. James's hand was shaking now, though he tried to hide it by setting down his wine glass. Whatever you think you've found. Oh, I found everything, I said, finally allowing a hint of steel to enter my voice. Every transaction, every fake account, every falsified document. Did you really think I spent the last year just waiting at home, playing the dutiful wife? The memories of our early years together surfaced unbidden, lazy Sunday mornings, surprise vacations, small thoughtful gestures that had made our love seem unshakable. But beneath those golden memories lay the truth I'd uncovered. A man so consumed by greed and power that he'd sacrificed everything we'd built together. Your father always warned you about me, I mused, watching as various emotions played across James's face. He said someone with my background in financial crimes investigation would never make a suitable corporate wife. He was right, wasn't he? Just not in the way he imagined. Sarah started to stand, but I raised a hand to stop her. I wouldn't leave just yet. The FBI agents in the restaurant lobby might have some questions for you about those offshore accounts in your name. The blood drained from James's face as realization dawned. All those months he thought he'd been cleverly hiding his affairs, both romantic and financial. He'd actually been weaving the rope for his own undoing. You see, I continued, sliding the USB drive across the table, this contains everything the federal investigators need to unravel your entire scheme. And thanks to your dramatic choice of venue tonight, we have plenty of witnesses to establish that you voluntarily received this evidence. The past year of pain, betrayal, and careful planning crystallized in this moment. Every late night spent tracking transactions, every tear shed over discovered lies, every moment of humiliation had led to this perfect convergence of justice and revenge. The silence at our table was deafening. I watched as James's perfectly crafted facade crumbled, revealing the man I'd truly married. Not the charming CEO who'd swept me off my feet at that corporate law conference 12 years ago, but the calculating manipulator who'd seen me as nothing more than a convenient stepping stone. You don't know what you're talking about, he attempted, but his voice lacked its usual authority. My position at Sterling Corp. was handed to you by your father, I finished. The same father who built the company from nothing, who warned you about marrying someone with my particular skill set. I turned to Sarah, whose designer dress suddenly seemed to hang heavy on her shoulders. Did he tell you about his background, Sarah? About how he was the third choice for CO, only securing the position after two other candidates mysteriously withdrew. Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers clutched her purse. She'd come from the marketing department, a rapid rise through the ranks that had raised eyebrows, but not as many as it should have. Her resume listed degrees from prestigious universities, references from influential executives, and a track record of successful campaigns. All carefully fabricated, as my investigation had revealed. Your real name isn't even Sarah, is it? I said softly, watching her composure crack. Elena Petrova graduated from a small community college in Minnesota, changed her identity 3 times in the past 5 years. You've played this role before, haven't you? The ambitious young executive, helping married CEOs embezzle funds before disappearing with your cut. James's head snapped toward her, genuine shock registering on his face. For all his cunning, he'd been played just as thoroughly as he'd tried to play me. The irony would have been amusing if it weren't so tragic. I was a federal prosecutor before I switched to corporate law, I continued, addressing them both. Specialized in white-collar crime. That's how James and I met. I was investigating his father's company for potential securities fraud. I smiled at the memory. James was so charming, so seemingly transparent. He helped me prove the allegations were false. I thought he was different from the corrupt executives I usually dealt with. The restaurant's ambient noise seemed to fade as I leaned forward. But you weren't different, were you, James? You were just better at hiding it. When we married, you made sure I took a position at a private firm, away from any oversight of Sterling Corp's activities. You encouraged me to focus on merger acquisitions rather than forensic accounting. Every career move you suggested led me further from discovering what you really were. Sarah, or Elena, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her eyes darted toward the restaurant's entrance, where 2 men in dark suits had just appeared. Your father was right about one thing, I said, watching James's face. My background made me uniquely qualified to understand corporate fraud. But he was wrong about me being unsuitable. I was exactly what this situation needed. I reached into my purse and withdrew one final document. This is a copy of my resignation letter from Morrison and Sterling, submitted this morning. Effective immediately, I'll be returning to the FBI's white-collar crime division. I stood, smoothing my dress. They were particularly interested in my intimate knowledge of Sterling Corp's operations. The look of betrayal on James's face was almost comic. He'd orchestrated this dinner to humiliate me, to flaunt his young mistress and declare me obsolete. Instead, he'd walked straight into a trap years in the making. Agent Thompson will want to speak with you both, I said, nodding toward the approaching FBI agents. I suggest you cooperate. Your father's influence won't help you this time, James. The board received copies of all the evidence an hour ago. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the restaurant's window. The woman staring back bore little resemblance to the trusting bride of 10 years ago, or even to the successful corporate lawyer I'd become. This woman was something else entirely, a fusion of all my past roles, hardened by betrayal and sharpened by purpose. As I walked away from the table, I could hear the FBI agents beginning their rehearsed lines. Mr. Sterling, Ms. Petrova, we need you to come with us. But I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Everything that would unfold now had been meticulously planned over the past 6 months. The maitre d' handed me my coat with a knowing smile. He'd been well compensated for his role tonight, ensuring our table was perfectly positioned within view of the restaurant's security cameras. Every word, every gesture, every document I'd presented had been carefully recorded, additional evidence for the prosecution. In my car, I pulled out my secure phone and sent a single text, "Checkmate." Within minutes, digital copies of all Sterling Corp's fraudulent transactions would be released to every major financial news outlet. The morning headlines were already written. But this wasn't a plan born of sudden inspiration. No, it had taken shape during those long sleepless nights after I'd first discovered James's deception. I remember the exact moment, finding a receipt for a diamond bracelet I'd never received, dated our last anniversary. That single slip had unraveled everything. I'd given myself 1 week to grieve. 7 days of tears and rage hidden behind closed doors. On the 8th day I'd begun to plan. The first step had been reaching out to Marcus, my old colleague from the FBI. I need surveillance, I'd told him over coffee in a quiet cafe 3 towns over. Everything you can get on James Sterling and Sterling Corp's financial movements. Marcus had been hesitant initially. This isn't just about infidelity, is it? He'd asked, studying my face. It never is with men like James, I'd replied. Give me 2 months. I'll prove there's something bigger. Those 2 months had been a masterclass in deception. While James thought I was throwing myself into work to cope with our crumbling marriage, I was actually building a case. Every late night at the office had been spent tracing money trails, documenting suspicious patterns, and connecting dots that painted a damning picture. I'd hired private investigators to track both James and Sarah, planted listening devices in their favorite meeting spots, gained access to their private communications through entirely legal channels. Amazing what a worried wife can accomplish with a good lawyer and evidence of suspected financial fraud. The real breakthrough had come when I discovered Sarah's true identity. Elena Petrova wasn't just a con artist. She was a known associate of several financial crime rings. That discovery had led to a secret meeting in a parking garage worthy of a spy novel. I can offer you immunity, I'd told her 3 months ago. Full witness protection, new identity, clean slate. All you have to do is help me prove what James is doing. Elena had been smarter than James gave her credit for. She'd seen the writing on the wall and agreed to play her part, continuing her role as the infatuated mistress while documenting every illegal transaction James asked her to handle. Tonight's dinner hadn't been James's idea at all. I'd orchestrated everything, using Elena to suggest the restaurant, the timing, even the cruel way he'd chosen to end our marriage. James's ego had made him believe it was all his own plan. Each step had been calculated, each reaction anticipated. I'd known James would choose to humiliate me publicly. His narcissism wouldn't allow for anything less dramatic. I'd known Elena would wear my grandmother's bracelet. I'd planted it in James's desk myself, knowing he'd give it to her as a trophy. As I drove home now, I thought about the evidence folders being delivered to board members' homes, the international wire transfers being flagged and frozen, the arrest warrants being executed at multiple locations. In a few hours, the empire James had stolen from his father would crumble. My phone buzzed with an incoming text from Marcus. All targets in custody. Evidence secured. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. I pulled into my driveway, the same one James and I had shared for a decade, and smiled at the irony. While he'd been planning tonight's grand gesture of humiliation, I'd been setting up the final pieces of my elaborate trap right under his nose in our own home. Another text from Marcus lit up my phone. Package 2 delivered. Board members responding. Everything was unfolding with clockwork precision. The evidence I'd gathered hadn't just been sent to the FBI. I'd made sure every board member of Sterling Corp received personalized packages containing proof of how James's actions had specifically damaged their interests. Old Mr. Richardson would be particularly interested in how James had manipulated his family's shares. Mrs. Zhang would be furious about the falsified Asian market reports. Each package was tailored to hit where it would hurt most, ensuring the board would turn on James completely. I entered our house, soon to be just mine, and walked straight to James's study. The wall safe behind his prized Monet, a fake, another secret I'd uncovered, held more than just documents. I spun the dial with practiced ease. He never knew I'd learned the combination months ago by simply watching him open it one night while he thought I was asleep. Inside lay the final pieces of evidence. Original documents proving his father had never actually signed over full control of the company. James had forged the transfers, taking advantage of his father's declining health. I'd found them 3 weeks ago but left them in place, knowing tonight would be the perfect time for their discovery. The FBI would be here within the hour with a search warrant. They'd find exactly what they were looking for, exactly where I'd ensured it would be. The safe, James's laptop with its hidden partition, the backup drive disguised as a coffee coaster. All would tell the same damning story. I moved to our bedroom, the room we'd shared until James started spending more nights at his executive apartment, and opened my jewelry box. The empty spot where my grandmother's bracelet had been seemed to mock James's arrogance. He'd never suspected that I'd planted it in his desk, knowing he would give it to Elena as a twisted trophy. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Elena. Secondary files sent to prosecutors. En route to safe house. She had played her part perfectly, documenting every illegal transaction James had trusted her with. Her relationship with him had been the perfect cover for gathering evidence, and her immunity deal would ensure she stayed far away from any fallout. I changed out of my burgundy dress, carefully hanging it up. This dress had been more than just an outfit. It had been a costume for the most important performance of my life. Every detail of tonight had been choreographed. The wine I'd ordered, James's favorite, making him lower his guard. The table location in full view of security cameras. Even the timing of the FBI agent's arrival. The foundation for this evening had been laid months ago. Each business trip James took had given me time to piece together his criminal empire. Every late night he spent with Elena had allowed me to access his office, copy files, plant evidence. His own arrogance had made him careless, leaving digital breadcrumbs that any skilled investigator could follow. I poured myself a glass of wine, not the overpriced Bordeaux from dinner, but a simple Merlot I actually enjoyed, and settled into my home office. My laptop showed multiple email notifications. Board members responding to the evidence, financial alerts as accounts were frozen, news organizations picking up the first hints of the scandal. The perfect setup wasn't just about gathering evidence or timing its release. It was about understanding people, their weaknesses, their motivations, their breaking points. James had always underestimated me, seeing only what he wanted to see. The trophy wife who'd given up a promising career in law enforcement for him. He never realized that I'd never stopped being an investigator. I just found a more personal case to solve. My phone lit up with a video call from Marcus. The timing was perfect. Exactly 1 hour after I'd left Le Petit Jardin. It's done, he said, his face illuminated by police lights flashing in the background. James Sterling is in custody. You should see his face when we found the hidden compartment in his office. I took another sip of wine, savoring the moment. And Elena? Safely in witness protection. She's already given her official statement about James's involvement in the embezzlement scheme. The evidence she provided matches perfectly with your documentation. On my laptop screen, news alerts were already starting to pop up. Sterling Corp. CEO arrested, screamed one headline. Massive financial fraud uncovered at Sterling Corp., declared another. The financial news channels would be running this story non-stop by morning. I switched to the security feed I'd installed in James's office months ago. FBI agents were methodically going through every drawer, every file, finding each piece of evidence exactly where I'd ensured it would be. The look of defeat on James's face as they'd let him out in handcuffs was something I'd remember forever. The board members? I asked Marcus. All 9 of them have pledged full cooperation with the investigation. Mrs. Zhang was particularly vocal about pressing charges after seeing those falsified Asian market reports. Everything was falling into place exactly as planned. The execution of this plan had been flawless, each component triggering the next like a line of perfectly arranged dominoes. James's attempt to humiliate me at our anniversary dinner had become the catalyst for his own destruction. My security system alerted me to movement at the front door. Right on schedule, the local police arriving with a search warrant for our home. I buzzed them in, playing the part of the shocked and cooperative wife perfectly. Mrs. Sterling, the lead detective said gently, "We have a warrant to search the premises. We understand this must come as a shock." I let my voice tremble slightly. "Of course, officer. Please do whatever you need to do. I just can't believe all those late nights he said he was working." They moved through the house efficiently, finding the damning evidence in James's study exactly where it needed to be. The false bottom in his desk drawer. The encrypted files on his personal laptop. The offshore account documents hidden in his rare book collection. Each discovery adding another nail to the coffin of his defense. My phone buzzed again, Elena's burner phone this time. Package delivered to DA's office. All accounts transferred as planned. I'm going dark now. Thank you for the second chance. I deleted the message immediately. Elena had been the perfect accomplice, playing her role as the homewrecker while actually helping to gather the evidence that would bring James down. Her own criminal past had made her the ideal candidate for turning state's evidence. The police were now in James's home office, photographing everything. I watched as they discovered the fake Monet, another piece of evidence that would lead to additional charges of art fraud. James's perfect world was unraveling thread by thread, and he was powerless to stop it. "Mrs. Sterling," the detective called out, "we've found something interesting in your husband's safe. Did you know about these documents?" I walked over, feigning confusion. I never knew the combination. James was very private about his business matters. The detective held up the forged documents showing James's theft of company control from his father. My anonymous tip about those would hit the DA's desk tomorrow morning, adding another layer to the prosecution's case. "No," I whispered, letting my eyes fill with tears. "I had no idea." All this time, as the officers continued their search, I retreated to the kitchen, ostensibly to make coffee for everyone. In reality, I needed a moment to appreciate how perfectly everything had aligned. The execution of my plan had been flawless, from the public humiliation James had orchestrated unwittingly against himself, to the precise timing of law enforcement's involvement. Dawn broke over the city as the last police car pulled away from our Humiliating driveway. The morning news was already running the story on every channel. Sterling Corp CEO arrested in massive fraud scheme. The financial networks were having a field day, their ticker tapes blood red with the company's plummeting stock prices. I sat in my kitchen watching the chaos unfold on multiple screens. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since sunrise, reporters, board members, old colleagues all wanting to know how I was handling the shocking revelation of my husband's crimes. If only they knew. The first call I took was from James's father. Despite his declining health, his voice was sharp with anger and disappointment. "I warned him about you," the old man said without preamble. "Told him never to trust a woman with your background. But I never imagined he'd betray me like this." "I'm so sorry, Richard," I replied, letting genuine sympathy color my voice. James's father had always been kind to me, even while warning his son against our marriage. "If there's anything I can do..." "You've done enough," he said quietly. "The board is meeting in an hour. We'll need an interim CEO to handle this crisis." I smiled into my coffee cup. Right on schedule. The aftermath was spreading like ripples in a pond. James's closest allies at Sterling Corp were being suspended pending investigation. The company's stock had dropped 40% in pre-market trading. International partners were distancing themselves, canceling deals that James had personally orchestrated. My laptop pinged with an email from Elena's lawyer. Her official statement had been filed with the DA's office. She detailed every transaction, every illegal deal, every instance of fraud she'd witnessed. Her testimony would be devastating to James's defense. The doorbell rang, Marcus arriving with official papers. "The DA wants to take your statement," he said, settling into my kitchen with his own coffee. "They're building a rock-solid case. James hasn't said a word since his arrest, but with the evidence we have, he doesn't need to." I nodded, reviewing the preliminary charges. Fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, tax evasion, corporate espionage. Each charge backed by meticulous documentation, each piece of evidence properly obtained and catalogued. "His lawyers?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Dropped him this morning. Apparently, they found out about the forged documents transferring company control from his father. They don't want any part of this." The morning papers arrived and I spread them across my kitchen island. Each headline was more damning than the last. Financial journalists were already calling it the scandal of the decade. Expert commentators were predicting prison sentences measured in decades, not years. My phone buzzed again, a text from James's sister Catherine. "I always knew he'd self-destruct eventually. Are you okay?" I left it unanswered. Catherine had been another unwitting player in this game, her genuine concern for my well-being helping to mask my investigation over the past months. The aftermath wasn't just professional. James's social circle was disintegrating. Country club memberships revoked. Charity board positions resigned. The carefully cultivated image he'd built over years was crumbling in a matter of hours. "The press will want a statement," Marcus reminded me gently. "They'll get one," I assured him. The devoted wife, shocked and devastated by her husband's betrayal, standing ready to cooperate fully with authorities. My performance at Le Petit Jardin had been just the beginning. Now came the harder part, maintaining the facade of the wronged wife, playing my role in the public aftermath of James's downfall. A final text came through from an unknown number. Elena, one last time, forever grateful. Good luck. Then her number went dark as she disappeared into her new life under witness protection. I looked around my kitchen at the empire of evidence I'd built to destroy the man who'd thought he could discard me. The aftermath was still unfolding, but the hardest part was done. James would never see it coming until it was too late. 1 month later, I sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse, watching as James was led in wearing an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from his bespoke suits. He looked older, defeated, his carefully maintained appearance now showing signs of strain. He didn't look at me, but I made sure he could feel my presence. The hearing was brief but decisive. James had finally agreed to a plea deal, facing 20 years in federal prison and forfeiture of all assets gained through illegal means. His lawyers had advised him it was the best offer he'd get, given the mountain of evidence against him. Your Honor, the prosecutor announced, we have reached an agreement with the defendant. In exchange for his full cooperation in ongoing investigations, Mr. Sterling will plead guilty to all charges. I watched James's shoulders slump as the judge reviewed the terms. His father sat 2 rows behind him, looking more devastated than angry now. The mighty Sterling family name, built over generations, had been destroyed in a matter of weeks. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, hungry for a statement from the devoted wife who'd been blindsided by her husband's crimes. I played my part perfectly. I'm still processing everything, I told them, letting my voice catch slightly. The James the First knew, or thought I knew. I just hope the truth brings some closure to everyone affected by his actions. Later that evening, I sat in what was now officially my house. The plea deal had included James forfeiting all claims to our joint assets, and opened a special bottle of wine I'd been saving. Not the overpriced Bordeaux James had preferred, but a simple Californian red I'd discovered on our first date, before he'd tried to remake me into his perfect corporate wife. My phone lit up with a message from Richard Sterling. The board has reviewed your proposal. We'd like to meet tomorrow to discuss your role in rebuilding the company. Everything had come full circle. James had once pushed me away from corporate oversight. Now I would help lead the effort to resurrect Sterling Corp from the ashes of his crimes. His father, who had once warned him about my background in financial crime investigation, now saw it as the company's salvation. Elena was thriving in her new life, her immunity deal securing her freedom and a fresh start. The last update from her handler indicated she'd enrolled in college, pursuing a legitimate career far from her past cons. Sometimes the best revenge included allowing others a chance at redemption. I walked through the house, finally free to make the changes I'd always wanted. James's pretentious art collection, mostly forgeries as the investigators had discovered, would be replaced with pieces I actually loved. His study, that fortress of secrets and lies, would become my home office. The media had already dubbed it the Sterling scandal, but they'd missed the real story. They focused on the financial crimes, the corporate espionage, the dramatic arrest. None of them suspected that the entire thing had been orchestrated by the quiet wife they depicted as another victim of James's deceptions. I opened my laptop one last time that evening, reviewing the final piece of my resolution. My official statement accepting the position of Chief Compliance Officer at Sterling Corp was ready to be released tomorrow. The board had been eager to demonstrate their commitment to transparency and reform. Who better to prevent future fraud than the woman who had exposed the last one? James's last words to me had been at Le Petit Jardin. Meet the upgrade. He never realized that I was the one who'd be upgraded, from trophy wife to corporate savior, from victim to victor. The resolution wasn't just about justice or revenge. It was about transformation. James had tried to diminish me to make me smaller. Instead, he'd given me the perfect opportunity to reveal my true self. As I got ready for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back wasn't the same one who'd endured that humiliating anniversary dinner. She was stronger, sharper, more complete. James had wanted to write my ending, but instead he'd only set up my beginning. Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. I disagree. The best revenge is served at precisely the right temperature with perfect timing and garnished with absolute victory. My sister-in-law insisted on serving me a slice of cake she baked just for me. I thanked her, cut it in half, and gave the other piece to her daughter. 15 minutes later, she turned pale. I should have seen it coming. Vanessa stood across from me, her smile stretched just a little too tight, her eyes watching me a little too closely. The crowded dining room hummed with laughter and conversation, but in that moment, all I could hear was the thudding of my own heartbeat. "Olivia, I made this just for you," she said, holding out a plate with a single slice of cake. A generous, perfectly cut piece, golden layers, smooth chocolate frosting, a delicate drizzle of caramel. It looked harmless. Looked thoughtful. But Vanessa had never been thoughtful toward me. Her words dripped with artificial warmth, her tone just a little too sweet, as if daring me to refuse. Around us, family members were engrossed in their own conversations, oblivious to the silent exchange happening between us. But I felt it. A shift in the air, the way Vanessa's eyes never left my face. I hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation I saw it. The flicker of something in her expression. Not anticipation. Not pride in her baking. Oh, it was something darker. Something I couldn't name just yet. I smiled, careful to keep my voice light. "Wow, Vanessa, this looks amazing. You really went out of your way." Her lips twitched, almost as if she was suppressing a smirk. "Of course. I know how much you love chocolate." I didn't. And she knew that. For years, Vanessa had taken little jabs at me, her teasing never quite crossing the line into outright cruelty, but always just enough to leave me questioning whether it was intentional. At first, I had convinced myself it was just her personality. She was the kind of person who always found a way to poke fun at someone, claiming it was just a joke. But over time I realized that with me it was different. The way she would loudly point out when I gained a little weight after the holidays. The way she accidentally spilled wine on my new dress. The way she laughed a little too hard when she brought up embarrassing stories from my past in front of guests. And now here she was, presenting me with a cake she had made just for me. I glanced at the plate again. Something wasn't right. But refusing it outright would cause a scene. Vanessa was an expert at playing the victim, and I wasn't about to give her another reason to paint me as ungrateful. So I did the next best thing. I picked up my fork, sliced the cake in half and smiled. "You know, Mia loves chocolate cake. She should try some too." Vanessa's entire body stiffened. It happened in a fraction of a second, but I caught it. The way her fingers clenched around the serving knife, the way her smile wavered. "Oh no," she said quickly, her voice just a bit too high-pitched. "It's really rich. She might not like it." I turned to Mia, who sat on the other side of the table, her little legs swinging beneath her chair. "Do you want some, sweetheart?" Mia grinned. "Yeah." And before Vanessa could object, I placed half the slice on Mia's plate. Vanessa's face drained of color. I watched her closely, my stomach twisting with unease. She was a woman who rarely lost her composure. No matter what was happening, she always had a quip, a playful eye roll, a carefully controlled reaction. But not now. Now she sat frozen, her fork motionless in her hand, staring at Mia as if she had just made the worst mistake of her life. A thick silence settled between us. The sounds of clinking silverware and chatter filled the dining room, but at this table, it was as if the world had slowed down. Mia, oblivious to the tension, took a bite of the cake. And Vanessa's lips parted as if she wanted to stop her, but it was too late. My pulse quickened. What was in the cake? Vanessa swallowed hard, finally snapping out of her daze. She forced a laugh, though it was shaky. "I hope you like it, sweetie," she said, her voice strained. Mia nodded, still chewing. "It's good." Vanessa barely reacted. Her focus was on me now, her eyes darting between the plate in front of me and the one in front of her daughter. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the frantic calculations. And then, as if realizing she had no choice, she picked up her own fork and took a slow, deliberate bite. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The unease inside me grew. What had I just avoided? I didn't touch the cake. I couldn't. Not after seeing her reaction. My fingers trembled slightly as I set my fork down, forcing myself to act natural. If Vanessa had put something in that cake, I needed to know why. And more importantly, I needed to know what. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Vanessa kept stealing glances at Mia, her face unnaturally pale. I could feel her watching me too. Waiting. But for what? I didn't know. Yet. I barely touched my plate for the rest of the evening. My appetite had vanished, replaced by an unsettling weight in my chest. I kept my expression neutral, careful not to betray the storm of thoughts raging inside me. But I felt it, the cold sensation creeping up my spine, the nagging voice whispering in my mind. Something wasn't right. Across the table, Vanessa had barely spoken since Mia took that bite. She sat stiffly, her fingers curled around the stem of her wine glass, her smile long gone. Her eyes flicked to her daughter every few seconds as if expecting something to happen. I should have confronted her right then and there. I should have demanded to know why she looked so horrified, why she suddenly seemed so fragile in her own skin. But I didn't. Not yet. That I watched. I let the moment stretch, absorbing every flicker of unease in her face, every forced laugh, every failed attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere. I wanted her to feel my gaze on her, to know that I had noticed. And she did. Vanessa refused to meet my eyes for the rest of dinner. When the evening finally ended, I made my way to the coat rack near the door, reaching for my jacket when I heard the quiet rustle of footsteps behind me. Olivia. Her voice was different now, low, hesitant. Not the usual overly confident tone she used whenever she spoke to me. I turned slowly, my fingers tightening around the fabric of my coat. Vanessa stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her expression carefully blank. "You didn't eat the cake," she said, her words measured. I raised a brow, tilting my head slightly. "I wasn't that hungry." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're overthinking this." Overthinking. A small, humorless laugh bubbled in my chest. That was Vanessa's favorite phrase whenever she wanted to dismiss something, whenever she wanted to make someone feel ridiculous for questioning her. It was a phrase I had heard countless times before in different situations, always used to downplay her own actions. Like when she had accidentally spilled red wine on my dress at a family function and insisted I was overreacting. Like when she whispered backhanded compliments in my ear, her smile never faltering. Like when she once told my husband in front of everyone that she was surprised he had married me, because he always seemed like the type to go for someone more outgoing. Always the same game. But this time was different. This wasn't just a cruel comment or an embarrassing setup. This was something else. Something that had made her panic. I took a slow step toward her, lowering my voice. "Am I?" Her fingers twitched against her elbow. For a brief second I saw it again, the flicker of fear in her expression. Then just as quickly she smoothed it over with a tight smile. "I was just trying to do something nice for you," she said. "And you turned it into something weird." Weird. I bit back the words I wanted to say, the accusations ready to spill from my tongue. Now wasn't the time. Not yet. That I just smiled. Right. Must be my overactive imagination. Vanessa studied me for a moment longer before giving a small, forced laugh. "You're impossible," she muttered, shaking her head as she turned away. I let her go. Because I knew one thing for certain. Vanessa was hiding something. And I wasn't letting it go. The drive home was quiet. My husband, Daniel, was in a good mood, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that had rippled through dinner. He talked about how nice it was to see everyone, how the family should get together more often. I hummed in response, staring out the window, my mind far away. I had spent years enduring Vanessa's subtle jabs, her carefully placed insults disguised as jokes. It had started so small that I had convinced myself it was nothing. The first time I noticed it, we had been at a Christmas gathering. I was wearing a simple green dress, one I had been excited about. Vanessa had smiled when she saw me, but instead of a compliment she had leaned in and whispered, "That's such a bold choice. Not everyone can pull off a dress like that." I had laughed it off. It was just a comment. But then there were more. She had a way of making me second-guess myself, of making me feel like maybe I was the one who was being too sensitive. When I had gotten a promotion at work, she had smiled and said, "Wow, I wouldn't have expected you to be the corporate type. Good for you." When I brought homemade dessert to a family gathering, she had tasted it and said, "Oh, this is nice. Did you use a mix?" Every comment chipped away at me. And the worst part? No one else seemed to notice. To them she was just playful, just teasing. But I knew. I knew because I saw the way her eyes flickered whenever she landed a remark, the way she watched for my reaction. She enjoyed it. And tonight had been no different. Except this time she had gone further. This wasn't just a comment. This wasn't just a joke. This was something much, much darker. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as the thoughts circled in my mind. "Hey," Daniel said beside me, glancing over. "You okay?" I forced a small smile. "Yeah. Just tired." He nodded, not pushing the subject. And maybe that was my fault too. I had never told him everything, not really. He knew that Vanessa and I didn't always get along, but he had never seen the full extent of it. He didn't know about all the small moments, the words she had slipped under her breath when no one else was listening. He didn't know how much I had learned to swallow over the years. But I wasn't swallowing this. Not this time. By the time we got home, the unease inside me had hardened into something else. Determination. I pulled the napkin-wrapped piece of cake from my purse and set it on the counter. It looked harmless under the kitchen light, just another slice of cake. But I wasn't imagining Vanessa's reaction. I wasn't overthinking. Something was wrong. And I was going to find out what. I stood in my kitchen staring at the slice of cake still wrapped in the napkin. It sat on the counter, innocent in appearance but carrying a weight that sent a chill down my spine. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Daniel had gone to bed, completely unaware of the turmoil twisting inside me. I unwrapped the napkin slowly, revealing the soft layers of cake beneath. The frosting had smudged slightly, but it still looked as perfect as it had when Vanessa handed it to me. My fingers hovered over it, my stomach knotting with uncertainty. Was I being paranoid? Was this truly something sinister? Or had I finally let all of Vanessa's years of taunting warp my judgment? I reached for my phone. My fingers hesitated over the screen before I tapped a search bar and typed. Signs of food tampering. Lists of articles popped up, detailing methods, symptoms, and warning signs. Some of it was logical, strange textures, unusual smells, bitterness, but there were subtler things too. Things I wouldn't have noticed unless I had been looking for them. I brought the cake closer, inhaling lightly. Nothing. No odd smells, no strange discoloration. But that didn't mean it was safe. My stomach twisted at the memory of Vanessa's face when Mia had taken a bite. That was what kept me standing here now. If this were just another one of her petty games, another way to humiliate me, she wouldn't have reacted that way. No, this was something more. My pulse quickened. I needed answers. The next morning, I placed the wrapped cake slice into a small plastic bag and tucked it carefully into my purse. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew someone who might. A short drive later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small medical testing facility. It wasn't the kind of place that typically handled this sort of request, but I had called ahead, explaining that I needed an analysis for potential food contamination due to a severe allergy risk. The receptionist hadn't asked many questions, just told me to bring the sample. A woman in a white coat met me at the counter, her expression neutral but professional. You said you wanted this tested for allergens? She asked, taking the bag from me. Yes, I said carefully. I have a severe allergy to, I paused, choosing my words. Certain ingredients. I just want to be sure this wasn't cross-contaminated. She nodded. We can run a full panel. It'll take a couple of days. That was fine. I could wait. By the time I returned home, my mind was restless, bouncing between memories and half-formed suspicions. I made myself a cup of coffee, hoping it would help clear my head, but the moment I sat down at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed. Vanessa. I stared at the screen. She never called me. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity won. I pressed accept. Hello. There was a pause. Then, hey. Her voice was different, lower, strained. It lacked the usual casual confidence she always carried. Hey, I said carefully. Another pause. Then, so, Mia felt a little sick last night. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean? Vanessa exhaled, the sound crackling through the line. She just had a stomachache. Probably nothing. But I was thinking, she hesitated, then let out a nervous laugh. Maybe it was the cake? I kept my voice steady. Maybe. You did say it was really rich. She laughed again, but it didn't sound right. Yeah. Exactly. Silence stretched between us. I knew what she was doing. She was feeling me out, trying to see if I suspected anything. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I simply said, Is she feeling better now? Yeah. Totally fine this morning, she answered quickly. Too quickly. I could almost see her in my mind, pacing in her kitchen, biting her lip, twisting a strand of hair between her fingers like she did whenever she was anxious. Good, I said. Kids have sensitive stomachs. Another pause. Then, you didn't eat any, did you? The words were so quiet I barely caught them. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She wasn't asking out of concern. She was asking because she needed to know. Slowly I set my coffee down. No, I said, keeping my voice light. Like I said, I wasn't that hungry. Vanessa let out a breath, something that sounded almost like relief. And in that moment I knew. She had done something to that cake. And she had never expected me to catch it. I let the silence stretch, letting her sit in her own discomfort. Then finally I said, well, I'm glad Mia's okay. Maybe it was just something she ate earlier. Yeah, Vanessa murmured. Probably. Another awkward beat. Then, okay, well, I'll see you later. The call ended. I placed my phone on the table, staring at it. My hands were steady, my mind eerily calm. Vanessa had just confirmed my suspicions without even realizing it. She had expected me to eat the cake. She had wanted me to eat it. And now that I hadn't, she was panicking. I spent the rest of the day in a quiet haze, going through the motions but feeling detached from everything. I went to the grocery store, did some laundry, even answered a few emails. But through it all, my mind kept circling back to Vanessa. She had always been cruel in small, insidious ways. But this was something else. That night, as I lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling, I thought about all the times I had let her get away with it. All the times I had smiled through her taunts. All the times I had let her make me feel small. Not anymore. Vanessa thought she had gotten away with something. She had no idea what was coming. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of my husband beside me. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. It churned, looping over the details of the past 24 hours like a crime scene investigator piecing together a case. Vanessa had wanted me to eat that cake. That much was obvious now. But what wasn't obvious was why. I turned onto my side, staring into the darkness. The weight of suspicion pressed against my chest, heavy and unrelenting. The cake was now in the hands of the lab technicians, but their results would take time. And I wasn't a patient person, not when it came to something like this. Vanessa was hiding something. I just had to figure out what. The next morning I woke up with a plan. Daniel was already gone for work, leaving me alone in the quiet of our house. I made myself a cup of coffee, but my stomach twisted too much for me to drink it. I needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. 15 minutes later, I pulled into Vanessa's driveway. Her house was picture perfect as always. White siding, navy blue shutters, flower beds perfectly maintained. The kind of home that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But behind that pristine exterior was a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of making me feel small. Not today. I stepped out of my car, walking up the pathway with forced calmness. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and damp earth, the morning sun casting long shadows across the yard. I knocked. A few seconds later, the door swung open and Vanessa stood there, still in her robe, a cup of coffee in her hand. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise, but it was the quick flicker of unease in her eyes that made my stomach tighten. "Olivia," she said, forcing a smile. "What are you doing here?" I returned her smile, though mine felt far more controlled. "Thought I'd stop by. You seemed a little off last night." Her grip tightened on her mug. "Off?" I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "Yeah. You looked really nervous when Mia ate the cake. And then you called me out of the blue this morning. Just seemed odd, that's all." She laughed, but it was thin, shaky. "Oh, come on. You know how I am about food. I was just worried I'd overdone it on the richness. I didn't want Mia getting sick." I let the moment stretch, watching her closely. She was a skilled liar, I'd give her that. But I'd learned something over the years. Vanessa could fake a lot of things, but she couldn't fake guilt. And right now, guilt clung to her like perfume. I decided to push further. "Did you use a new recipe?" I asked, stepping past her into the house uninvited. She hesitated but closed the door behind me. "Sort of. It was one I found online." "Mind if I see it?" She blinked, taken aback. "See what?" "The recipe," I said, meeting her gaze. "I might want to try making it myself." She let out another nervous laugh, but this time her hand twitched slightly at her side. "Oh, I didn't save it." "Really? You always save your recipes." She wet her lips, her fingers wrapping tighter around the coffee mug. "I just forgot this time." Lies. I could feel them spilling from her one after another. And the more she spoke, the more I knew I was right to be here. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice even. I sent the cake for testing. Vanessa froze. Her knuckles turned white against the ceramic mug. You what? I watched her carefully, noting every micro-expression, the slight widening of her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way she swallowed as if her throat had suddenly gone dry. I had a feeling something was off, I continued. So I took a piece to a lab. They should be getting back to me soon. For a moment she didn't say anything. The silence between us thickened, stretched. Then she let out a sharp exhale, forcing a laugh that was so brittle it almost cracked in half. That's insane, she said, shaking her head. You actually think I would do something to your food? I didn't answer. Because I knew she was expecting me to back down. She was waiting for me to laugh it off, to say of course not, don't be silly. That's how it always went. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Instead I simply said, I guess we'll find out soon enough. Her face drained of color. And for the first time since I had known Vanessa, she had nothing to say. I left her house feeling lighter but also more determined than ever. She had cracked. She had tried to maintain her usual confidence, but I had seen right through it. She was hiding something that had nearly made her collapse under the weight of my words. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A new email. My stomach flipped as I clicked it open. The lab results were in. My eyes scanned the text quickly, my breath hitching as I reached the final lines. Traces of crushed medication found in sample. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the phone tighter. She had done it. Vanessa had actually tried to lace my food. I had expected something, maybe an irritant, something mild. But this was deliberate. My pulse pounded against my temples. This wasn't just bullying. This wasn't just years of snide remarks and passive-aggressive digs. This was attempted harm. I stood there in my driveway, the warm sun pressing against my skin, but all I felt was cold. Vanessa had crossed a line she couldn't come back from. And she had no idea that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. I stood frozen in my driveway, staring at my phone, my fingers gripping it so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The words on the screen burned into my mind. Traces of crushed medication found in sample. I swallowed hard, my pulse thudding in my ears. My breath came shallow and the world around me seemed to blur. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. Vanessa had put something in that cake. The weight of it settled over me, heavy and suffocating. She had laced my food with something strong enough to be detected in a lab. My stomach twisted as a sickening realization settled over me. What if Mia had eaten more? What if I hadn't given her that slice? What if I had taken the bite, smiled politely, and swallowed my own downfall? Anger flared in my chest, a slow-burning fire that roared to life. I had spent years brushing off Vanessa's cruelty, letting her taunts roll off my back like they meant nothing. But this was attempted harm. And she was going to face me for it. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. Before I even realized it, I was in my car, the engine roaring to life. My hands clenched the wheel as I pulled out of my driveway, my foot pressing harder on the gas than necessary. My mind swirled with a storm of thoughts, each one darker than the last. I had given Vanessa a chance to explain. I had looked her in the eyes and given her a way out. She had lied. She had laughed it off. And all along she knew exactly what she had done. Now she was going to answer for it. When I pulled up to her house, I barely had time to turn off the ignition before I was out of the car, striding up the front path. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs, adrenaline fueling my steps. I didn't knock. I pounded. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and demanding. Seconds stretched. Then the door swung open. Vanessa stood there, dressed casually in leggings and a sweater, her hair pulled into a loose bun. For a moment she looked startled, but as her eyes met mine, something else flickered in them. Recognition. And then fear. He knew. Olivia, she said, her voice a forced, airy calm. What are you? I shoved my phone toward her face. Read it. She blinked. What? I stepped closer, my voice low and firm. Read it. Hesitant, her gaze dropped to the screen. The moment her eyes scanned the words, her entire body stiffened. A thick silence settled between us. Then she let out a weak, breathy laugh. Oh, come on. This is ridiculous. I didn't move. I didn't blink. Try again. Her fingers twitched at her side. You're seriously going to believe some random test over? Don't. My voice was steady, but the anger in it cracked through like a whip. Do not stand here and gaslight me, Vanessa. Her mouth snapped shut. I took another step forward, forcing her back into the entryway. You put something in that cake. The lab found it. And now you're going to tell me exactly what you were thinking when you did it. She let out a dry chuckle, though it held no real humor. You're acting like I tried to poison you. I didn't look away. Did you? Her face paled. Of course not. I tilted my head. Then what was in it? Her mouth opened then closed. She had no answer. My chest tightened. I could go to the police right now, I said, my voice unwavering. This is evidence, Vanessa. I have proof. So you better start talking. Her breathing quickened, her eyes darting toward the living room as if searching for an escape. Then finally her shoulders sagged. I didn't mean for it to be serious, she muttered, avoiding my gaze. I scoffed. Oh right. Slipping something into my food is just a little prank now. He swallowed. It was just supposed to make you sick. That's all. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. That's all. She flinched. My fingers curled into fists at my sides. Why, Vanessa? Why the hell would you do this? Her jaw clenched, and for a moment she said nothing. Then slowly she looked up and I saw it. The raw resentment, the years of buried jealousy creeping into her expression. Because you always win, she said quietly. My stomach twisted. What? Her lips pressed together before she spoke again, her voice sharper now. You always come out looking perfect. Everyone loves you. My parents. My husband. Our entire family. Her hands curled at her sides. And no matter what I do, I'm always second best. I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the absurdity of it all. So you thought this was the solution? I asked, disbelief laced in my tone. You wanted to make me sick because of your own insecurities? She exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. I shook my head in disgust. You're unbelievable. A silence fell between us, thick and suffocating. And then a soft voice spoke from the top of the stairs. Mom. Vanessa and I both turned. Mia stood there, rubbing her sleepy eyes, her hair tangled from sleep. She looked at me, then at her mother, confusion flickering across her little face. Vanessa's shoulders stiffened. Go back to bed, sweetie. Mia's brow furrowed. Why are you yelling? I inhaled sharply, a wave of sadness washing over me. Because this was the real tragedy, wasn't it? The fact that Vanessa's selfishness, her bitterness, could have put her own daughter at risk. I turned back to her, my voice now quiet but firm. I don't care what your reasons were, Vanessa. I don't care about your jealousy, your insecurities, or whatever twisted logic you used to justify this. I shook my head. What I do care about is that you crossed a line you can't come back from. Her eyes darkened. So what? You're going to ruin my life now. I let out a slow breath, then stepped back. No, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady. You did that all on your own. I turned toward the door, leaving her standing there, her face a mixture of anger and something else. Something dangerously close to regret. But it was too late for that now. I walked away from Vanessa's house with my heart pounding against my ribs, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I should have felt relieved, victorious even. I had confronted her, forced her to admit what she had done. And yet there was no satisfaction in it. Because the truth had spilled out, raw and ugly, but it had done nothing to cleanse the air between us. If anything, it had made the weight of her actions even heavier. Vanessa had tried to make me sick. And for what? Because she felt like I always won? Because she thought my life was somehow perfect? I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back and shake her, make her understand that she had built this entire story in her head. That my life wasn't some flawless masterpiece she had to compete with. That I had struggles, pain, and moments of weakness just like everyone else. But it didn't matter, did it? Because she had already chosen to hate me. She had already let that bitterness fester inside her until it twisted into something dangerous. And now she was suffering the consequences of her own choices. I took a slow, shuddering breath, forcing myself to focus on the road. My hands tightened on the wheel as I made a decision. This wasn't over. Not yet. By the time I got home, the house was quiet. Daniel was in the living room, flipping through channels mindlessly. He glanced up as I walked in, his brow furrowing at the sight of me. Hey, he said, setting the remote down. You okay? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Was I okay? I wasn't sure anymore. I exhaled slowly, then walked over and sat down on the couch beside him. For a moment I just stared at my hands, tracing the faint lines on my palms. I need to tell you something, I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. His expression shifted instantly. Concern. What is it? I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to tell him, but because saying it out loud somehow made it more real. But it was real. So I told him. Everything. I watched as his face darkened, his jaw tightening with every word that left my mouth. By the time I finished, his fingers had curled into fists against his lap. She did what? His voice was sharp, anger simmering beneath the surface. I nodded, swallowing against the lump in my throat. I got the lab results back today. The cake had traces of crushed medication in it. He shot up from the couch, running a hand over his face as he paced the room. Are you serious? Vanessa, she actually tried to drug you. Yes. A heavy silence filled the room. Then suddenly he let out a harsh laugh, one with no humor. And she just admitted it? I nodded slowly. Not at first. She tried to brush it off, act like I was overreacting. But when I pushed her, she cracked. Daniel turned to me, his eyes burning with barely restrained fury. She could have killed you, Olivia. The words hit me harder than I expected. Because they were true. I had been so caught up in why she did it, so tangled in the emotions of it all, that I hadn't let myself really process what could have happened if I had actually eaten that cake. Or worse, if Mia had eaten more of it. My stomach twisted painfully. Daniel exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. We're going to the police. I looked up at him, startled. What? He turned, his eyes blazing. You heard me. This isn't just some petty grudge anymore, Olivia. She drugged food with the intent of making you sick. That's a crime. I swallowed hard. I know. Then why are we still sitting here? I hesitated. Because deep down, part of me didn't want to go to the police. Not because I wanted to protect Vanessa. Far from it. But because I knew what it would do to Mia. Vanessa's daughter had no idea what kind of person her mother really was. She was still just a child, innocent to the reality of the woman raising her. If I pressed charges, Vanessa would be arrested. There would be an investigation. Custody battles. Family chaos. And Mia would be caught in the middle of it all. And for what? To punish a woman who had already destroyed herself? I took a shaky breath. Daniel, I want her to suffer, but I don't want Mia to suffer with her. His jaw clenched. And what happens when Vanessa does this to someone else? What happens when she doesn't get caught next time? I had no answer. Because he was right. Vanessa wasn't just bitter. She was dangerous. And people like her didn't stop unless someone forced them to. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I picked up my phone and called the one person who would make Vanessa finally answer for what she had done. Her husband. When Mark opened the door, his expression was unreadable. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady. He nodded once, stepping aside to let me in. I had never been particularly close to Mark. He was polite, kind even, but he had always seemed oblivious. Or maybe willfully ignorant to Vanessa's nature. But not today. Today I was going to make sure he saw the truth. I sat down across from him in the living room, gripping the test results in my hands. I placed them on the coffee table between us, my gaze locking onto his. What is this? He asked cautiously. I took a breath. Proof. He frowned, reaching for the paper. As he read, his face paled, his fingers tightening around the page. This, his voice trailed off. He swallowed hard, looking up at me. Tell me this isn't real. I met his gaze. It's real, Mark. She did this. His hands trembled as he set the paper down. She could have hurt you. I nodded. She could have hurt Mia. His breath hitched. And in that moment I saw the exact second that reality crashed down on him. The way his entire body tensed. The way his shoulders slumped like the weight of his wife's sins had finally become too heavy to ignore. She's sick, he whispered, more to himself than to me. No, I corrected. She's cruel. A long silence stretched between us. Then finally he nodded. I'll handle it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I believed him. Because he had more to lose than anyone. Mark sat there in silence, his fingers still clutching the test results as if they might dissolve in his grasp. His breathing was slow, measured, but his knuckles had turned white from how tightly he gripped the paper. I could see it happening. The moment the illusion shattered, the moment he realized that the woman he had built his life with was not who he thought she was. A long, heavy exhale escaped his lips. I don't even know who she is anymore. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees. Maybe you never did. His eyes flickered toward me, something between grief and rage settling in them. I always knew she was difficult. She's been like that since we were young. Always had to be in control. Always had to be the center of everything. But this is something else. I nodded slowly. It is. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Mark finally set the test results down, rubbing a hand over his face. I have to protect Mia. That was the one thing we could agree on. Then do something, I said, my voice quieter now. Because if you don't, I will. His shoulders stiffened. He knew what that meant. I could go to the police. I should go to the police. But I was giving him a chance to deal with it first. To take responsibility before this turned into something worse. His jaw tightened. I'll take care of it. I studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of hesitation. There was none. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been sleeping next to a stranger for years. I stood. Then I'll leave it to you. He didn't stop me as I walked out. And I didn't look back. The fallout happened faster than I expected. Words spread through the family like wildfire. At first it started as whispers. Something was wrong between Mark and Vanessa. No one knew the details yet, only that Mark had packed a bag and taken Mia with him to stay at his parents' house. Then the truth came out. I don't know if Mark told them or if Vanessa, in a desperate attempt to spin the situation, had confessed something herself. But within days everyone knew. And suddenly, Vanessa found herself standing in the ruins of the life she had so carefully constructed. The first time I saw her after everything fell apart, she looked different. Gone was the perfectly styled hair, the flawless makeup, the carefully curated image she always upheld. She looked smaller, as if the weight of her own actions had finally started to crush her. I ran into her at the grocery store. She was alone, hovering near the produce section, her hand gripping a basket like it was the only thing anchoring her to the ground. She saw me before I saw her. I only realized it when I felt the burning weight of her gaze on me. For a moment I considered walking away. I had no interest in speaking to her, no desire to hear whatever excuse she had prepared. But she spoke first. Are you happy now? Her voice was hollow, lacking the usual sharpness it once carried. I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. Excuse me. You got what you wanted, she said, her lips curling into something that was neither a smirk nor a smile. You wanted to ruin me and you did. I stared at her, unblinking. You ruined yourself, Vanessa. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. No. I made a mistake. One mistake. And now my life is over. I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly. One mistake. My voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. Vanessa, you spent years trying to tear me down. You thrived off of making me feel small. And when words weren't enough, you tried to poison me. Her face twisted. It wasn't poison. Then what was it? She had no answer. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You did this to yourself. Every lie, every cruel word, every petty game, you built this. And now you have to live in it. Her nostrils flared, but there was no fight left in her. You have no idea what I've lost, she whispered. I arched a brow. You lost a husband who finally saw you for what you are. You lost a family who refuses to enable your behavior anymore. And if you're not careful, you're going to lose Mia too. That hit its mark. Her face crumpled for just a second before she caught herself. I don't need your pity, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Good, I replied. Because you won't get it. And with that I walked away. The last I heard, Vanessa had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. She was no longer invited to family gatherings. No one called to check on her. She had built her entire identity on being the one in control, the one who could manipulate and twist people's perceptions to suit her needs. But the moment she lost that power, she had nothing left. Exile, I realized, wasn't just about being physically alone. It was about the unbearable weight of knowing that for the first time no one cared if you were. And Vanessa? She had never learned how to exist without an audience. Vanessa was gone. Not in the dramatic grand way I once imagined. No police cars, no handcuffs, no courtroom standoff. There was no explosive, final battle where she screamed apologies or begged for forgiveness. Instead, her absence was quieter, subtler. And yet it was heavier than anything I could have anticipated. The woman who had once dominated every family gathering, whose voice had been the loudest in every conversation, was now just missing. Her name wasn't spoken. No one asked about her. No one even brought up the situation, as if she had simply faded into the background of a life she had once tried so hard to control. And maybe that was the real punishment. Not public humiliation. Not legal repercussions. But the slow, gnawing realization that no one cared anymore. At first, I thought the weight would lift off my chest. That I would wake up one morning and finally feel free, as if shedding her presence from my life would be like taking off a heavy coat in the summer heat. But closure isn't something that happens all at once. It lingers. Catches you in the quiet moments. Like when I went to a family gathering a few weeks later and found myself instinctively bracing for some passive-aggressive comment that never came. Or when I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty space on the counter where the cursed slice of cake had once sat, my stomach twisting in memory. Or when Mia's laughter rang through the air as she played with the other kids, and I wondered if she fully understood what had happened. How could she? How could an innocent child ever comprehend that her own mother had been the architect of her own downfall? It haunted me more than I wanted to admit. One evening, I found myself parked outside a small apartment complex on the other side of town. I hadn't meant to come here. I had no reason to be here. And yet here I was. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I had expected to see Vanessa through one of the windows, sitting in her new reality, forced to live with what she had done. Maybe I had imagined her alone, broken, regretting everything. But there was nothing. No grand realization. No catharsis. Just a row of dimly lit apartments identical to each other. And the quiet understanding that I had wasted my time coming here. I wasn't here for closure. Already had it. Weeks turned into months. The world kept moving forward the way it always does. Mia stayed with Mark, who had finally started to shake off the remnants of the life he had built with Vanessa. He was quieter now, more serious, but there was something else, too, determination. Like he had been handed a second chance to do things right. Mia? She thrived. She was too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, but she sensed the shift. She was lighter, freer. No longer caught between the tension of a household that had been slowly cracking apart. I saw her one afternoon at the park, running across the playground with her cousins, her laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air. It was the happiest I had ever seen her. And for the first time in a long time I felt something settle inside me. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. Vanessa didn't try to reach out. Not to me. Not to Mark. Not even to Mia. At first I thought she might fight. That she would claw her way back into the family, demand to be heard, insist she was misunderstood. But she didn't. Because even she knew, there was no coming back from this. Her exile was complete. And she had no one to blame but herself. One day I received a letter. No return address. No name. But I knew. The moment I saw the familiar sharp handwriting, I knew. I sat on my front porch, the envelope resting in my lap like a loaded gun. Did I want to open it? Did I need to open it? A part of me wanted to tear it up, to throw it away without a second thought. But another part, curiosity maybe, won out. With careful fingers I slid the paper out, unfolding it slowly. And I read, Olivia, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I want you to know that I've had time to think. Really think. And I see it now. I see what I did. I see what I became. And I hate it. I hate what I did to you. I hate what I did to Mark. But most of all, I hate what I did to Mia. I know I don't deserve anything from you. Not forgiveness. Not understanding. Not even a response. But I needed you to know that I see it now. And I'm sorry. I don't know where I go from here. But I hope one day Mia can forgive me. That's all I want now. Vanessa. I stared at the paper, my fingers tightening around it. The words sat there, inked into the page, weightless and heavy all at once. Did she mean it? Was this genuine regret or just another manipulation, one last desperate attempt to claw her way back into our lives? I didn't know. And the truth was I didn't care. Because it wasn't about me anymore. Vanessa had spent her entire life trying to control the narrative, to bend reality to fit her desires. But now she had to sit in the truth. She had to wake up every morning knowing she had built this exile with her own hands. And that was justice enough. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then, without another thought, I tossed it into the fireplace and watched as the flames swallowed it whole. Some things weren't meant to be held onto. Some things were meant to burn. And as the last of the paper curled into embers, I let out a slow breath. Not of relief. Not of triumph. But of something far better. Freedom. If this story resonated with you, remember that choosing peace is the most powerful form of justice. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that inspire and empower. Your support means the world. After my husband's funeral, I came home to his brother and his ex-wife dragging in suitcases, flashing a forged will. "The house and $2 million are ours now," she spat. I didn't argue. I smiled. They thought they won, but they had no idea what was already in motion. "The house and $2 million are ours now," Tasha spat, her red lacquered nails tapping against the document she'd triumphantly slapped onto the coffee table. I didn't argue. I simply smiled. The kind of smile that would have warned them had they known me at all. But they didn't know me. They never had. 3 hours after we lowered my husband into the ground, I stood in my own living room watching James's brother Victor and his ex-wife drag suitcases across my hardwood floors. The audacity shouldn't have surprised me. Nothing about vultures should surprise anyone. The funeral had been a performance worthy of Broadway. Victor, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit that James had actually paid for last Christmas, had wept on cue. His shoulders heaved dramatically whenever someone important approached. The CEO of James's company, our attorney, wealthy investors who had backed my husband's vision. I watched from behind my veil as Victor clutched their hands, voice breaking with fabricated grief while his eyes remained calculating, cold. Tasha had kept to the periphery, a shadow in designer black, her presence raising eyebrows among those who remembered the vicious divorce 6 years ago. She'd strategically positioned herself beneath a large oak tree, seemingly respectful in her distance but close enough to document who attended, who mattered, who controlled what pieces of James's legacy. When she thought no one was looking, I caught her checking her watch 3 times during the eulogy. "We've already moved some things to make space," Victor announced, interrupting my thoughts as he casually moved a framed photo of James and me in Santorini from the mantel, replacing it with some hideous crystal sculpture Tasha had produced from her luggage. "You'll want to pack quickly. Our movers arrive tomorrow morning." "Tomorrow?" I echoed, my voice impressively steady despite the rage building behind my ribcage. "That's rather efficient." "No point dragging this out," Tasha replied, already inspecting the kitchen cabinets. "Is this real Wedgwood? I always told James he had surprisingly good taste for someone so focused on code and computers." I watched her fingers stroke the china James's grandmother had left him, pieces I had carefully unpacked and arranged when we first moved in. Pieces that held memories of anniversary dinners and quiet Sunday breakfasts. "May I see the will?" I asked, extending my hand with practiced calm. Victor exchanged a quick glance with Tasha before retrieving the document from the coffee table. "It's all perfectly legal," he insisted too quickly. James came to his senses about certain things before the end. The paper felt heavy in my hands, weighted with their betrayal. My eyes scanned the document, noting immediately what they hoped I wouldn't catch: subtle inconsistencies in James's signature. After 15 years of marriage, I had seen my husband sign thousands of documents. The pressure points were wrong. The J slanted at an angle James never used. The loop on the final S closed completely, something my meticulous husband never did. 3 months earlier, James had called me into his study late one night, his face gaunt from treatments that were failing to stop the cancer's progression. "Victor came by the office today," he'd said, voice barely above a whisper. "Asked about access to the secure servers. Said he wanted to help organize my affairs given the circumstances." That night marked the beginning of my quiet investigation. James had been too weak to pursue his suspicions, but I wasn't. My background in forensic accounting, a career I'd set aside when we married, provided skills perfectly suited for tracking the digital breadcrumbs Victor didn't know he was leaving. "Elena," Victor prompted, impatience creeping into his tone. Did you hear me? We need you to acknowledge receipt of the formal notice. I blinked, focusing back on their expectant faces. Of course. Just processing everything. I carefully refold the document, buying myself precious seconds. I assume you'll want the master bedroom? The question caught them off guard. They'd prepared for hysterics, for legal threats, for the emotional breakdown of a grieving widow. My acquiescence visibly unsettled them. Yes, Tasha answered cautiously. Though we might renovate. James always had such conventional taste. Except in technology, Victor added quickly. Speaking of which, did he happen to mention where he kept his home backups? For his work files. Just trying to make sure his legacy is properly preserved. And there it was, the true purpose behind the forged will, the rushed eviction, the theatrical grief. James had developed a revolutionary AI architecture in the months before his diagnosis. A system that could revolutionize predictive algorithms across dozens of industries. The patents alone were worth millions, but the proprietary code was the real prize. I wouldn't know about that, I lied smoothly. James kept his work life separate from home. 1 week after James had shared his suspicions, I had discovered the hidden room. What appeared to be an ordinary bookcase in his study concealed a sliding panel, revealed only when 3 specific books were pulled in sequence. Inside, I found a compact workspace containing encrypted hard drives, multiple monitors, and documentation that confirmed everything. Tasha had re-established contact with Victor shortly after James's diagnosis became known in industry circles. Her new employer, a direct competitor to my husband's company, had orchestrated the entire reconciliation. I'll need tonight to pack some essentials, I said, moving toward the stairs. If you don't mind. Of course not, Victor replied with false magnanimity. Take what's personally yours. Nothing more. In our bedroom, soon to be their bedroom, I locked the door and moved efficiently, selecting only what I genuinely needed. Clothes, toiletries, the journals James had kept during his illness. From the hidden safe behind our closet mirror, I retrieved passports, birth certificates, and the small jade elephant James had given me on our first anniversary. Everything else was replaceable. Everything else was just backdrop to the scene I was carefully setting. Before leaving, I accessed the hidden room one final time, activating the dormant security system James had installed throughout our home. Every room began silent recording, creating backups to multiple secure servers. Within seconds, my phone received confirmation. Full surveillance was live and transmitting. Downstairs, Victor and Tasha had already opened a bottle of James's favorite whiskey, 60-year-old Macallan we'd been saving for his remission celebration. They didn't bother to hide their glasses as I descended with my single suitcase. I'll be staying with Maggie for now, I announced calmly. I should be fully moved out by tomorrow evening. Victor raised his glass in mock salute. To smooth transitions. And new beginnings, Tasha added with a predatory smile. I nodded, turning toward the door before allowing myself a final comment. James always said everything happens for a reason. I'm starting to believe he was right. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn as I loaded my suitcase into the car. From my phone, I could already see the live feed from the living room. Victor and Tasha clinking glasses, laughing, her hand sliding possessively over furniture that still held the imprint of my life with James. They thought they had won everything. They had no idea what was already in motion. Driving away from the house felt like leaving a piece of myself behind, but I knew better than to look back again. I kept my eyes focused on the road ahead, one hand on the steering wheel, the other clutching my phone as the live surveillance feed continued to stream. Tasha was already redecorating in her mind, pointing dramatically at walls and fixtures with disdain, while Victor nodded along, his attention clearly elsewhere. I arrived at Maggie's modest townhouse to find her waiting on the porch, arms crossed, fury evident in her stance. Tell me you aren't actually letting those parasites take everything, she demanded as I stepped out of the car. Not here, I whispered, embracing her tightly. The walls have ears. 20 minutes later we sat in her kitchen as I showed her the feed on my phone. Victor was now examining the bookshelf in James's study, running his fingers along the spines with growing impatience. He knows something's there, I explained, sipping the strong coffee Maggie had prepared. James mentioned the hidden room to him once when they were teenagers. He's been obsessed with finding it ever since. Will he find it? Maggie asked. I allowed myself a small smile. Not without the correct sequence. And even if he stumbled upon it by sheer luck, he'd find nothing but empty drives now. On screen, Victor had abandoned the bookshelf and moved to the large painting that concealed James's wall safe. Unlike the hidden room, the safe wasn't particularly secretive. Most visitors assumed it contained valuables or important documents. Victor spun the dial with practiced precision. Clearly, he'd watched James open it before. He knows the combination, Maggie noted with alarm. James changed it 3 months ago, I replied calmly. But I changed it again last week to the one code Victor would eventually try, James's birthday. The moment arrived faster than I anticipated. After several frustrated attempts, Victor's face brightened as the safe door swung open. His expression quickly soured as he reached inside to find only a single flash drive nestled in the otherwise empty compartment. He held it up triumphantly for Tasha, who had appeared in the doorway. "Is that it?" she asked, disappointment evident in her voice. "Where are the certificates? The backup drives? The prototype specifications?" "This has to be it," Victor insisted, pocketing the drive. "Let's check his laptop." I switched camera views on my phone, following them to the master bedroom where James's personal laptop remained on his desk. Victor connected the flash drive, fingers tapping impatiently as he waited for it to load. "What's on it?" Maggie whispered. "Nothing they can use," I replied. "But everything we need." The screen showed Victor's growing frustration as windows of encrypted code filled the monitor, each attempt to access files meeting security protocols that triggered additional encryption layers. What he didn't realize was that each failed attempt was simultaneously documented and transmitted to a secure server, building evidence of their intentions. "I need to go," I said, standing abruptly. "There's something I need to check on." Maggie frowned. "You're not staying here?" "That's what they expect," I explained, gathering my suitcase. "But James prepared for this possibility long before he got sick. There's an apartment in Westview Towers purchased through one of his shell companies. They can't trace it to either of us." The apartment was small but perfectly equipped, a minimalist space with state-of-the-art security and enhanced internet connectivity. The living room wall displayed 6 large monitors showing different areas of our home. I settled at the desk, connecting my laptop to expand my surveillance capabilities. By evening, Victor and Tasha's exploration had turned frantic. The camera in the master bathroom captured Tasha attempting to pry open floor tiles, convinced James had hidden valuables beneath them. In the basement, Victor repeatedly tried different code combinations on the server room door, growing increasingly agitated with each failure. "Access denied," the security system announced in its artificial voice, a feature James had disabled years ago that I'd reactivated remotely. Victor kicked the door in frustration, leaving a dent that only triggered another security alert. The most satisfying moment came shortly after midnight when Tasha attempted to leave for cigarettes. The garage door opened obligingly as she backed her luxury SUV toward it, then abruptly closed when her vehicle was halfway through. After 3 identical attempts, she abandoned the garage entirely, opting for the front door, which mysteriously locked behind her, leaving her key ineffective upon return. Victor had to let her in, their heated whispers about faulty wiring and old house problems, bringing me unexpected comfort as I prepared for bed in my sparse new accommodation. Morning brought the first real crack in their alliance. Victor's phone call to James's bank revealed the harsh truth I'd been anticipating. The accounts mentioned in the forged will contained barely $84,000 combined, not the millions they'd expected. "This is impossible," Victor shouted, pacing the kitchen while Tasha sat stone-faced at the island. "James was worth at least $8 million. The company valuation alone." "Maybe he moved it," Tasha suggested, her calm demeanor barely masking her panic. "Offshore accounts. Trust funds. There has to be an explanation." "Or we've been played," Victor growled, slamming his fist on the counter. "What if Elena knew about this? What if she's been pretending to be clueless this whole time?" I smiled at the monitor, simultaneously typing an anonymous email to James's bank flagging suspicious activities on his accounts. The security department would investigate any unusual access attempts, like Victor's call this morning using James's personal information. My next task involved activating Phase 1 of James's home automation system, A sophisticated network he'd installed primarily for convenience but that could be repurposed for my needs. Lights began behaving erratically throughout the house, dimming during important conversations, brightening suddenly when either of them mentioned anything related to James's work. The climate control system required more delicate manipulation, subtle temperature changes making the master bedroom uncomfortably warm while keeping the study unusually cold. Small discomforts designed to fray nerves already stretched thin by disappointment. By afternoon, the first serious argument erupted in the living room. Tasha accused Victor of misleading her about James's assets, while Victor suggested she'd been working her own angle all along. I gave up a perfectly good position at Meridian Systems for this, she hissed, gesturing around the house. I can't go back now, they know exactly why I left. That's your problem, Victor retorted. I told you what I knew based on financial statements from last year. Something's changed. Someone moved the money. We need to find that hidden office, Tasha insisted. You said it exists. Somewhere in this house is everything we need. The prototype alone would be worth millions to the right buyer. Their candid admission of intentions recorded perfectly for later use. I leaned back in my chair, allowing myself a moment of grim satisfaction. James had always said the best revenge required patience, intelligence, and allowing your enemies to destroy themselves. From my vantage point in the apartment no one knew existed, I watched the house slowly turn against them, becoming as much my ally in this chess game as James himself had been in planning it. They had no idea what they couldn't see, but they would. Soon enough they would see everything. 3 days into their occupation, Victor made his first serious attempt to access James's private study. The main study was accessible to anyone, of course. The room where James entertained colleagues and conducted video conferences. But the inner sanctum, the space where my husband had done his most innovative work, remained hidden despite their increasingly desperate search. I watched Victor on my monitors, methodically tapping the wooden panels along the east wall of the study. James had mentioned once, after too many glasses of wine at a family gathering years ago, that he kept his most valuable work behind the walls. Victor had clearly remembered and was determined to find the entrance. What he didn't know was that James had installed pressure sensors throughout the paneling. Certain patterns of taps would trigger different security responses. Random tapping would do nothing, but a specific rhythm, one Victor was inadvertently creating as he worked his way along the wall, would activate what James had playfully called the timeout room. Come on, Victor muttered, his frustration evident as he pressed harder against the wooden panels. It has to be. The click was barely audible through my speakers, but Victor's triumphant expression told me he'd heard it. The panel slid sideways, revealing a small anteroom, not the main hidden office, but a security checkpoint James had designed specifically for uninvited guests. Victor stepped inside eagerly, the motion sensors tracking his movement. 3 seconds later, the panel slid shut behind him with a definitive thunk. What the? Victor spun around, pushing against the now sealed entrance. Tasha, he called, banging on the wall. Tasha. But Tasha was 2 floors away, trying different combinations on our bedroom safe, completely unaware of Victor's predicament. The anteroom was soundproofed, another of James's precautions. Victor pulled out his phone, his face falling as he registered the absence of signal. He paced the small space, examining the featureless walls for any control panel or emergency release. Finding none, he eventually sat on the single chair in the center of the room, defeated. James had designed the timeout room with unexpected visitors in mind. It contained no dangerous elements. Air circulated freely, the temperature remained comfortable, and a small water dispenser provided hydration. But it was programmed to remain sealed for 6 hours once triggered, resetting the countdown with each attempt to force exit. I watched Victor's growing panic with a strange detachment. He checked his watch repeatedly, tried his phone from different positions, even attempted to pry the panel open with his house keys. Each effort proved futile. When Tasha finally realized Victor was missing, nearly 2 hours had passed. I observed her increasingly frantic search through the house, calling his name with growing irritation. She never thought to check the study until almost dinner time, and even then she had no way of knowing he was sealed inside the wall. By hour 5, Victor had moved through rage, desperation, and resignation. He sat motionless in the chair, staring blankly at the wall. When the panel finally slid open automatically, Tasha had long since given up searching and was nursing a glass of wine in the kitchen. Victor emerged shaken, disoriented by the experience and furious at what he perceived as a deliberate trap. His suspicions weren't entirely wrong. "Something's not right about this house," he declared to Tasha later that evening, his voice carrying clearly through the kitchen monitors. "It's like it's working against us." Tasha dismissed his concerns as paranoia, but I noticed she eyed the ceiling corners after that, searching for cameras she couldn't see. James had been thorough in concealing the surveillance system, embedding tiny lenses within light fixtures and air vents. The following morning brought Tasha's true skills into focus. While Victor slept off his ordeal, she set up sophisticated equipment I recognized from my research into her background. Hardware designed to penetrate secure networks and bypass conventional firewalls. I watched with grim satisfaction as she connected her devices to our home network, confident in her abilities yet unaware of the defensive mechanisms James had implemented. Within 30 minutes, warning alerts flashed across my screens. Tasha had triggered the network's security protocols. The counterattack was silent but devastating. Rather than simply blocking her, James's system allowed limited access while corrupting her equipment with targeted malware. Each of her probing attempts was logged, documented, and traced back to her previous employer, building a comprehensive record of corporate espionage attempts. My phone chimed with messages from the automated security system, detailing each breach attempt and countermeasure deployed. I forwarded the most damning evidence to my private email, adding to the growing file against them. That night I initiated the first real psychological offensive. At precisely 2:17 a.m., when both were finally asleep, I activated the house's integrated speaker system. James's voice, collected from various home videos and recordings, echoed softly through the master bedroom. "The security protocol has been breached," his disembodied voice announced calmly. "Initiating countermeasures against unauthorized access." Victor bolted upright, flipping on lights while Tasha remained frozen in bed, eyes wide with genuine fear. "What was that?" she whispered. "Was that?" "It sounded like James," Victor confirmed, his voice unsteady. "Some kind of automated message." I played another clip 20 minutes later, just as they'd convinced themselves it was a dream or technical glitch. "All attempts to access secure files have been logged and reported," James's voice stated matter-of-factly. "IP addresses and methods have been documented." Their relationship deteriorated rapidly after that night. Breakfast the next morning devolved into accusations, with Tasha questioning Victor's competence and Victor insinuating that Tasha's technical expertise must be exaggerated if she couldn't even access basic files. "You said this would be simple," she hissed, slamming her coffee mug down. "A grieving widow, distracted and emotional. A straightforward will execution. Where's the money, Victor? Where are the research files your brother supposedly kept here? Maybe if you were actually as skilled as Meridian thought you were, we'd have answers by now," Victor shot back. By week's end they were sleeping in separate rooms. Victor took the master bedroom while Tasha claimed the guest suite, their united front crumbling under the weight of frustration and suspicion. I documented everything methodically, creating timestamps and saving video clips of their most incriminating conversations. When they attempted to forge my signature on additional bank documents, amateurishly on the dining room table in full view of a hidden camera, I forwarded the footage to Michael Kane, a private investigator who had been my colleague before I left the accounting firm. "This is better than I expected," Michael commented during our secure video call. "They're doing all the work for us." "They're getting desperate," I replied, watching Victor pace the living room on my secondary monitor. "The house is becoming their prison." Michael's laugh carried a predatory edge. "A prison of their own making. Your husband was a genius." "Yes," I agreed, fingering the jade elephant pendant I hadn't removed since James gave it to me. "He knew them better than they knew themselves." The house that knew too much was slowly revealing their secrets, one surveillance clip at a time. The 10th day brought a breakthrough, at least Victor thought so. While ransacking James's closet for the third time, he discovered a hidden compartment beneath the false bottom of an old humidor. His triumphant shout echoed through the surveillance system as he held up a sleek external hard drive, its metallic surface gleaming under the bedroom lights. "Tasha, get in here," he called, already connecting it to his laptop. "I found something." I leaned forward in my chair, anticipation tightening my chest. The drive had been James's idea, a honeypot designed to lure exactly this type of intrusion. I'd planted it 3 days before the funeral, sliding it into the hiding spot I knew Victor would eventually discover. Tasha appeared in the doorway, her initial excitement fading to caution. "Wait," she said, reaching toward the laptop. "We should scan it first. It could be." "It's fine," Victor dismissed, already clicking through folders labeled with promising titles. "Anyway, investing opinions, patent face." The tracking software installed silently in the background, designed to remain undetectable by standard security programs. Within seconds, it began transmitting data from Victor's laptop to my secure server. His contacts, emails, text messages, browsing history, and most importantly, his communications with Tasha's employer, Axiom Technologies, James's chief competitor. "These are encrypted," Victor growled, clicking frantically through files that appeared complete but remained inaccessible. "Maybe your technical expertise might actually be useful now." Tasha's expression soured, but she took his place at the laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. "These are sophisticated encryption protocols," she muttered. "But I might be able to." She worked for hours while Victor paced behind her. By evening, her frustration was palpable. "I need specialized equipment," she finally admitted. "This isn't something I can crack with basic tools." "Then call your people," Victor snapped. "That's why they sent you, isn't it? To get exactly this kind of information." The slip confirmed what I already suspected. Victor knew about Tasha's connection to Axiom. He wasn't just her unwitting accomplice. He was an active participant in the corporate espionage. Later that night, while Victor slept, Tasha made the call I'd been waiting for. She moved to the garden patio, clearly believing she was beyond the house's surveillance range. He was wrong. "It's me," she said quietly, her back to the hidden camera in the porch light. "Yes, I'm still here." "No, it's not going as planned." She paused, listening to someone on the other end. The widow moved out immediately, too quickly. Like she knew what was coming. Another pause. "We found a hard drive, but it's encrypted beyond anything I can handle remotely. No, I can't remove it from the premises. There's some kind of tracking protocol embedded in the house systems." She glanced nervously over her shoulder. "Something's not right about this place. The security is. It's like it's adaptive." The voice on the other end must have expressed displeasure, because Tasha's posture stiffened defensively. "I'm doing everything I can." Victor is becoming unstable, paranoid. He thinks the house is watching us. She lowered her voice further. "I need extraction. This mission is compromised." When she returned inside, I triggered the next phase of escalation. The house's security system activated without warning. Lights flashing, alarms blaring, every door and window in the south wing locking simultaneously. Tasha froze in the hallway, terror evident on her face as automated announcements echoed through the house. "Security breach detected. Containment protocols engaged." Victor emerged from the bedroom wild-eyed and disheveled. "What did you do?" he shouted at Tasha over the alarms. "Nothing. I was just outside getting some air." The system deactivated as abruptly as it had started, leaving them shaken in the sudden silence. Neither slept for the remainder of the night. The following morning, Victor announced his plan to generate cash by selling some of James's art collection. Specifically, 3 abstract paintings in the dining room that James had purchased as investments. "These are worth at least $500,000 each," he told Tasha confidently. "I've already contacted a buyer who doesn't ask questions." I watched him carefully remove the first painting, a large Rothko-inspired piece that James had particularly loved. Victor wrapped it carefully in blankets, oblivious to the fact that he was handling a replica. James and I had moved the originals to secure storage 2 months earlier, replacing them with sophisticated reproductions that would fool anyone but a professional appraiser. Victor's buyer arrived that afternoon, a nervous man in an ill-fitting suit who examined the painting with a loupe and ultraviolet light. His frown deepened with each test. "This is a reproduction," he finally announced. "A good one, but definitely not authentic." "That's impossible," Victor insisted, unwrapping the second painting. "My brother collected originals. He authenticated them himself." The buyer examined all 3 with the same result. "Someone switched them," he concluded, packing his tools. Happens more often than you'd think. Rich guy dies, staff gets ideas. He shrugged apologetically. I can't make an offer on reproductions no matter how good they are. After he left, Victor's rage was spectacular. He tore through the house, checking every painting and valuable object, finding similar substitutions throughout. The Ming Dynasty vase in the foyer? Replica. The signed first edition books in the library? Clever forgeries with photocopied signatures. She did this, he seethed, pacing the living room while Tasha watched warily from the doorway. Elena knew we were coming. She prepared for this. How could she have known? Tasha asked carefully. Victor spun toward her, suspicion dawning in his eyes. Unless someone told her. Unless someone warned her about our plan. The accusation hung in the air between them. Don't be ridiculous, Tasha scoffed, but her eyes darted toward the stairs, toward her packed suitcase I had observed her preparing earlier. That night the house turned hostile in earnest. The temperature in Victor's bedroom rose to nearly 90 degrees while Tasha's plummeted to a frigid 55. The water pipes groaned ominously whenever either of them tried to shower. Lights flickered during conversations but stabilized when they fell silent. By morning, Tasha had made her decision. I watched her methodically collect her equipment, downloading what little data she had managed to extract from the household systems onto a portable drive. She placed a brief call to a burner phone, requesting extraction in coded language that my surveillance system flagged and decoded instantly. She waited until Victor left for a meeting with the attorney, another dead end I had arranged, before wheeling her suitcase to the front door. But I had anticipated this moment. As she reached for the handle, I activated the estate's complete lockdown protocol from my remote station. Metal shutters slid silently over every window. Reinforced bolts engaged in every external door. The house transformed from passive observer to active prison in less than 30 seconds. Tasha's confusion turned to panic as she tried door after door, finding each one immovable. She ran to the garage, hitting the emergency release for the main door, only to discover that it too had been overridden. She was still frantically searching for an exit when Victor's car pulled into the driveway. Through the security camera, I watched him stare in confusion at the house's transformed exterior. The metal shutters, the reinforced entry points. When he finally gained entry through the one door I deliberately left accessible, he found Tasha surrounded by her packed bags and technical equipment in the foyer. Going somewhere? He asked, his voice dangerously soft as he took in the portable drive in her hand and the Axiom Technologies badge she had foolishly left visible in her open purse. The walls had finally closed in. Tasha's hand froze on the portable drive as Victor stepped fully into the foyer, his shadow stretching across the marble tiles between them. I can explain, she stammered, her usual composure shattering under his murderous glare. Axiom Technologies, Victor said slowly, picking up the badge from her purse. Were you working for them the entire time? Even during your marriage to James? I watched their confrontation unfold across my monitors, the camera angles capturing every nuance of their breakdown. The perfect moment had arrived. I closed my laptop, gathered the extensive files I'd compiled and texted Michael, "It's time." 20 minutes later, I sat in the back of a sleek town car heading toward the house, flanked by Margaret Winters, James's longtime attorney, and Philip Rowland, the executor of the actual will. In my lap rested a leather portfolio containing everything needed to end this game permanently. "Are you certain you want to do this in person?" Margaret asked, her silver hair catching the afternoon light. "We could send the security team first." "No," I replied firmly. "I want to see their faces." When our car pulled into the driveway, Victor and Tasha were still locked in heated confrontation, their argument having escalated throughout the house. The security cameras showed them in the kitchen now, Victor backing Tasha against the refrigerator, her technical equipment scattered across the counter between them. I deactivated the lockdown protocol with a few taps on my phone, allowing the front door to unlock with an audible click that carried through the speakers. The sound stopped their argument instantly, both heads turning toward the entryway. "Someone's here," Tasha whispered, fear evident in her voice. I stepped across the threshold of my home for the first time in 2 weeks, the familiar scent of lemon polish and James's favorite sandalwood incense still lingering despite their occupation. Margaret and Philip followed, their formal attire and stern expressions adding gravitas to our entrance. "Hello, Victor," I called, my voice echoing through the foyer. Tasha. I believe we need to talk. Their appearance when they emerged from the kitchen told the story of my success. Victor's once immaculate shirt was wrinkled and stained, his face haggard from sleepless nights. Tasha's designer outfit had been replaced by rumpled loungewear, her hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail rather than her usual perfect styling. What are you doing here? Victor demanded, attempting to regain control despite his obvious discomfort. This is our house now. Is it? I motioned toward the living room. Let's discuss that, shall we? Something in my confident tone must have unsettled them. They followed hesitantly, exchanging wary glances as we settled into the seating area. I took James's favorite chair, a position of power I deliberately avoided during our marriage but now claimed without hesitation. You've met Margaret, James's attorney, I began conversationally. And this is Philip Rowland, the executor of James's estate. His actual estate. Margaret opened her briefcase, removing a document bound in blue leather. This is the last will and testament of James Elliot Sullivan, properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. That's impossible, Victor interjected. We have the will right here. He gestured toward the forged document still lying on the coffee table. You have a forgery, Philip corrected, his voice carrying the weight of his 30 years in financial law. Quite a good one, but ultimately meaningless since all assets in question were already transferred before James's death. I savored their confusion, the dawning horror in their expressions as Margaret continued her explanation. 6 months before his diagnosis, James established an irrevocable trust with Elena as the sole trustee. The house, his patents, the research, the investment accounts, everything was moved into this entity. She slid the document across the table. The James and Elena Sullivan Living Trust. Quite thorough, quite legal, and quite impossible to challenge. You're lying, Tasha hissed, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her uncertainty. In response, I opened my portfolio and removed a stack of surveillance photos. Victor accessing James's private files, Tasha on the phone with her Axiom handler, both of them attempting to forge documents at our dining room table. The house has been watching you, I said simply. Every conversation, every attempted theft, every act of corporate espionage, all documented and time-stamped. Victor lunged forward suddenly, his control finally snapping as he reached for my throat. You manipulative. Before his hands could touch me, a side door opened and 2 security personnel in plain clothes stepped into the room. A third emerged from behind the curtains and a fourth appeared at the top of the stairs. Victor froze, suddenly aware that we hadn't been alone at any point. These gentlemen have been in the house for the past 3 days, I explained calmly. Another layer of protection James insisted upon once we realized what you were planning. How? Tasha whispered, genuine bewilderment crossing her face. How did you know? James knew his brother, I replied simply. And I knew my husband. When his diagnosis became terminal, we anticipated vultures. We just didn't expect family to lead the flock. Margaret placed 2 folders on the table, one red, one blue. You have 2 options, she stated professionally. The red folder contains comprehensive confessions to attempted fraud, breaking and entering, and corporate espionage, along with non-disclosure agreements. Sign them and you disappear. No public charges, no prison, just permanent exile from this family and industry. And the blue folder? Victor asked, his voice barely audible. Contains the evidence we'll provide to the district attorney, Axiom's board of directors, and the Technology Ethics Committee, Philip explained. I estimate minimum sentences of 15 years, given the calculated nature of your scheme and the evidence of premeditation. The room fell silent as the magnitude of their failure settled around them. Everything they had attempted had been anticipated, countered, and documented. Every move in their game had been observed by the invisible queen they had underestimated from the beginning. You have 30 minutes to decide, I said, standing. I'll be in James's study. As I walked away, I heard Tasha's broken whisper to Victor. She planned this from the start. We never had a chance. In the privacy of the study, I finally allowed myself to grieve, not just for James, but for the family he had wanted to believe in despite evidence to the contrary. For the brother who had envied rather than loved him. For the legacy that had attracted predators instead of protectors. When Margaret knocked softly 28 minutes later, I had composed myself again. They've signed the red folder, she informed me. The security team is escorting them to separate vehicles. I nodded, relief washing through me. And the house. As specified in the trust, it remains yours, along with all assets and research materials. After they departed, I moved through the empty rooms, reconnecting with the space that had witnessed both the happiest and most painful moments of my life. The silence felt cleansing after weeks of their invasive presence. In the basement, I pressed the sequence of panels that revealed the entrance to James's true sanctuary, the laboratory none of them had managed to discover. The door slid open, lights activating automatically as I stepped inside. The main console hummed to life, multiple screens displaying the progress of James's groundbreaking AI research. The neural framework that could revolutionize everything from medical diagnostics to climate modeling. His true legacy, now safe in the hands of the only person he had trusted completely. My phone chimed with a message from the security team. Subject V delivered to international terminal with one-way ticket to Singapore. Subject T en route to private airfield for chartered departure to Berlin. Both escorts confirm compliance with non-return agreements. I set the phone down and turned to the main keyboard, entering the access code James had created for me. The system responded immediately. Welcome, Elena. Project continuity awaiting your command. James had always said that chess wasn't about capturing the king. It was about controlling the board so completely that checkmate became inevitable long before the final move. He would have appreciated the elegance of this victory, achieved not through confrontation but through patience, intelligence, and the power of being perpetually underestimated. The queen had taken the board exactly as we had planned. If this story of sweet revenge kept you hooked, hit that like button now. I loved when Elena watched Victor panic in that locked room for 6 hours. What was your favorite part? Tell me in the comments below. Want more stories where the smart, quiet person wins in the end? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out. Remember, sometimes the person others underestimate is the most dangerous one in the room.